All right, welcome into week 13 of college football. This is BTB Analytics. We are down a man, but we got a ton of games, insights. We're breaking down the college playoff. We're breaking down a bunch of games this week, what the model has, and we will get into it right after this.
Give a damn about a hater when I feel like it. Not today, not today, not today, not tomorrow. Get out my way, please. I'm trying to get paid. Not today.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for those that are hanging out with us live. Thank you for those that are tuning in a couple of days after. We are BTB Analytics. I'm Seth. This is Steve. We're down a man. I have to do the obligatory, man, this is flying by. It's week 13.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And it is flying by. I think we basically have 2 real weeks. We're going to have a different aspect of postseason play. And, bowl season will look a bit different because we'll have the playoffs, but we still pretty much have 2 full weeks where we're going to be able to bet a bunch. And so we're going to do a little bit different this week. We're going to talk about some of the big games. Don't you worry, but we are going to focus on where the model is showing the most value so we can break down some of these games and kind of give you guys the most value. So without further ado, we're going to start off. I want to say Friday Night Lights, but this matchup is maybe more like a high school game than it is a college game. We're talking Purdue, Michigan State. And man, Steve, when I'm breaking down the numbers, this is forecasting to be an ugly, just classic Big Ten game. Maybe 2 of the more hallmark names in that Big Ten brand. But I want to start with you here. Model is making this number 13. We were able to bet actually a 14 at open. We make this number 11. The model really likes Purdue, which is ugly, but kind of give me some of your thoughts. Give me some of the angles here that you think the model is identifying.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, this is going to be the toilet bowl game of the week, man. And when we talk about this, for everyone who may be new here or who's been watching us for a little while, the one thing you will constantly hear us say is, 1, we're all about transparency about this process, and 2, we're never going to BS you. And this is how you know we're not BSing you, because this game is not at all going to be pretty. I guarantee you no tout is going to be talking about this game because it's not sexy, but this is what sports betting looks like when you're trying to do it full time. Value is value. But again, buckle up because it's not going to be pretty. I got to be honest, Seth. I can kind of do a little bit of mental gymnastics, but this one scares me. I mean, Purdue, let's just get it out the way. 1-9 record right now, 2-8 against the spread. But what gives me a little bit of hope, right? I mean, both of these teams, if you look at just this season's, efficiency stats from an EPA standpoint, and again, the definitions, if you guys aren't familiar with EPA, is in the description below. But both of these teams are bad at running and throwing the ball, but Michigan State is just less bad than Purdue is, right?
Yeah.
So looking at just kind of like this 12 games, or I guess 11 game sample size, Purdue coming in negative 0.21 on the EPA per pass and negative 0.12 per run. Michigan State negative 0.02 on the pass, negative 0.09 on the run. So again, both bad, but Michigan State's less bad. What I find interesting, though, is Purdue is actually a higher ranked offensive power rating. If you look at PFF grades, they're ranked 23rd. Michigan State's ranked 79th. And so here's kind of my mental gymnastics, right? So Purdue has lost 8 straight games, and they've gotten blown out in a lot of them by the big dogs, right? Penn State, they lost by 39. Ohio State, they lost by 45. Oregon, they lost by 35. Ohio State lost by 45, Oregon by 35, Notre Dame by 59. But they did hold their own against Illinois, and they lost, 50-49. Now, I do want to say Ryan Brown, the quarterback for Purdue, he's a backup. He played that game, so it's not a Hudson card. So a little bit of grain of salt there. But what I'm looking at here is Michigan State is not nearly the defense that Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, all those teams are. And so we've seen this team put up points in other matches. It's kind of been few and far between against the big dogs, but that's not Michigan State, right? I mean, you look at Illinois, they gave up 49 against them, and Michigan State isn't really some world burner we talk about on the defensive end. So I think the game script has to be that you've got Ryan Brown in there. You've got to put up points. I trust Purdue more to get into a shootout than I expect them to stop Michigan State. And so if they can put up points in a somewhat paceable fashion, then I think they cover here. I'm not saying Purdue's better than Michigan State. I'm just counting them not being 13 points worse than Michigan State here.
Yeah, that and cats on horse just said it right. 13.5 minus 105 make every moment more over there at FanDuel. Yeah, and let's put some rankings so you can see the raw statistics. Purdue 123rd best passing offense, 66th best rushing offense. Michigan State 81st best passing offense, 115th rushing offense. But on defense, these teams are horrible. Michigan State basically 112th best defense, Purdue 134th. But basically what I think the model is picking up here is both of these defense struggle, both of these offenses struggle, but neither of them are really paying off drives. We're looking at the 130th points per echo for Michigan State and 129th for Purdue. These are some of the worst teams in college football in finishing drives. And if you're not finishing drives, it's going to be really difficult to cover a 14-point spread. So this to me is really going to be a shootout. I just don't see I just don't see how these defenses can do anything. But the problem is these offenses aren't that potent. So maybe it's a Big Ten shootout, maybe like a 12-9 game or something like this. But I won't be surprised if this gets in the 20s or 30s, just because if you look back to that game that Purdue had success, that game went into the 30s. So, I mean, that was kind of the way that Purdue was going to win that game. So I think that's what the model's picking up here. This is going to be an ugly game. I really, I don't know. I'll watch, but man, it's going to be an ugly one. And I think the model, we'll see what the market's doing. It's been kind of early buying and selling. Low is 13, back up to 13.5. Like I said, I think we have a 14, but we still like it at 13.5. And as someone in the chat said, you can get it over at FanDuel for minus 105, which is some pretty good value. Even gives you a little bit of a bump. All right, Steve, let's take it. We're going to stay in the Big Ten, but we're going to go over to Iowa versus Maryland in another Big Ten kind of matchup, a little bit more of a potent offense, which I don't think was on my bingo card when we're talking about Iowa, but that's who they have been. Now, this game is going to be a little interesting. Iowa has some question marks at quarterback on who's going to be starting. Their backup that was backing up McNamara, he's now out for the season, bum ankle. But now Ferentz comes out today and says, well, I'm actually not sure if McNamara is the guy. He is back to practice. He's cleared concussion protocol, but I'm not sure if he's actually going to be going or not. So we might get the third string backup here for Iowa, which is a bit concerning. But this Iowa team is different than teams past, specifically on offense. We're talking about the 88th passing offense for Iowa, 42nd best rushing offense. Meanwhile, Maryland's 71st passing, 111th rushing offense. So, Steve, tell me what you think the model is picking up here. We do show a lot of value there at the 6 and the 6.5. If we can bring up, I forget what we actually make the number, but we do show value at the current number. So it is an opportunity. Eric, can we bring that up?
I think he has to fix the graphic. It's showing Virginia SMU. But yeah, we can talk about it. We made the number 10 is where we made it.
Okay, 10. Iowa. Okay, so it's moving through that key. We're getting basically through two key numbers. We're getting through the 7 and we're getting it to that key number of 10, which is where the model is really picking up a ton of value. So 6.5's on the table. But tell me why you think the model is liking this play, Steve.
Yeah. And I can say real quick, shout out Kev. He's watching us from across the pond. So thanks for tuning in, Kev. We appreciate you. We will be talking shit about you all podcasts, but you can't defend yourself. No, but yeah, listen, I do like this pick. Unlike the last one, this one does feel a lot more natural to me here. So, quarterback be damned, and that's a good point about coming in and who's making that quarterback play. But for me, it's going to be run the ball, right? This is Iowa's bread and butter. They run the ball more than average. They're better at running the ball, and they lead into that. So for me, regardless of who's playing quarterback, it's got to be Caleb Johnson running the ball here and really putting the team on his back. He's tied for 3rd in the country in rushing yards, 4th in rushing TDs, and he scored a rushing touchdown in every single game. Now, with that being said, Maryland will be the best run defense that Iowa's faced this year. But what I think is the model's picking up on here is defensively, their echo rate is pretty high. They're allowing teams to drive on them, and that can be problematic, against this Iowa team because Iowa Hawkeyes are 16 for 16 in red scoring opportunities this year. Now that is with Brendan Sullivan on the quarterback, so
Yeah.
we'll see what that looks like. But 14 touchdowns, 2 field goals, so they're paying off those drives. And so if Maryland can't stop them, Maryland's letting them get into their 40 and then into the red zone. Iowa can score points and put points on the board there. And then Maryland throws the ball a lot, but I think a big part of that is because they've been down a lot of these games, and I kind of expect a little bit of the same kind of script here. They lost by 14 to Rutgers. They lost by 21 to Oregon, by 25 to Minnesota, and by 27 to Northwestern. So, I mean, this is kind of a recipe where you can see Maryland kind of get back into this rut they've really sort of been in all year long. And then the final thing that I'll say is going back to Iowa's defense, because, listen, sexy quarterback be damned this year. When we think of Iowa football, we think about Iowa defense. And not only you can see their defensive EPA and their defensive echoes, but they are a turnover machine. They've forced 20 turnovers in their last 10 games, 14 interceptions, 6 fumble recoveries. They lead the Big Ten in turnovers, and I believe they're 14th. No, I'm sorry, they're 10th. They're 10th nationally in turnovers. So This is kind of a recipe where you have Maryland and Billy Edwards who's throwing the ball because that's who they are against a defense that's really good at stopping the pass and causing turnovers in the air. I mean, this can get out of control pretty quick. So I do like the -6 for Iowa. I feel a lot more comfortable with it.
Yeah, and one thing I thought was an interesting stat, you hit the head on the nail that Maryland's rush defense is actually quite good. We have them in number 9th in our database. The thing I found interesting, though, is Maryland's pass rate over expected for their defense is 36%. So when we look at Maryland's pass defense, they're 120th worst pass defense. So those two numbers are interesting because to me, what that's reading is, are we sure they're not good against the run? They're just so bad against the pass that teams are like, why would I even bother running the ball? Because those two numbers, are just clear that teams are identifying where they are weak and they are gashing them there. Like I said, 36%. Teams are throwing on this team 36% more than they average and than an average team would. So they are just basically saying, you could stop our run. We're not even going to try. So to your point there, this will be an interesting test. So if McNamara can't, come out and slang the ball, even though I think that this is maybe the perfect game to get back and try to get right, will Iowa actually be able to run the ball here? Because maybe these numbers are a little bit misleading there for Maryland. So again, I like the model here. 6 is what we got. 6.5 we would still take. I think based off where the market's at right now, it really hasn't moved one way or the other, basically sitting at 6.5. So if you're wanting to tail this, I think you want to get it before you move through the 7. That's going to be where you're going to lose a lot of the expected value. All right. Anything else in this game, Steve?
No, I mean, I just want to point out too, again, if you're watching this either tonight or when we kind of repost this, like Seth said, that's 7. We talk about being a key number. If you want to tell this, you got to get it in because you do drop a lot of that value. And I mean, I'd like to put you on the spot, Seth, but I think it's, well, no, actually I do know because it's 3.05. We can pull the graphic back up real quick. I mean, at 3% edge at 6.5 or 6 where we have, and we make the number 10 at 7, you can see there we have 3.05% expected value. Once you hit 7, that's going to drop. The 7.5, that's going to plummet.
Yeah.
So get it while you can. That's all.
Yep, exactly. And one other stat I thought was interesting, defensive echo rate over expected. Iowa's number 2, so they are not allowing teams to drive very well. And then once teams do get to the 40 or better, they're allowing the 14th least amount of points. So this is a really good Iowa defense, which again is on brand. When we look at Maryland, 76th best echo rate, so not very good. We can call that middle of the pack. But then when we look at points per echo, they are letting teams finish the drives, 100th in points per echo. So again, another data point of why we think Iowa will have success offensively and quite frankly, probably defensively, which you highlighted.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, I didn't realize this until now, but staying in the Big Ten.
Let's go.
Staying in the Big Ten. Yeah, we're on Big Ten bets this week. Nebraska.
I mean, someone's got to be the conference of champions now that the Pac-12 is done, right?
That is true. That is true. Did Big Ten absorb that because they got most of the? I guess they got the 4 of the better teams. Nebraska versus Wisconsin. This is an interesting one. These teams, when you start to break them down, are very, very similar. We'll talk about some of the specific stats, I think, where the model is picking this up. But basically, market right now is sitting at +2.5 for Wisconsin, where we think there's a ton of value. We think Wisconsin should be favored in this game. Yeah, that's where we bet it. So +2, +2.5, I think are great bets for Wisconsin. We would obviously support a money line bet there for Wisconsin. We tend to just stay with the spread markets, but the math would be in your favor there. Steve, talk to me about why you think Wisconsin is being the play here from the model when Nebraska's kind of been red hot coming into the season and then they've fallen off a bit. Is this, potentially people would be looking at this as like, oh, this is the week for Nebraska to get right. And I believe this is at home for Nebraska.
It is. But I know for a fact the model doesn't take this into account, but let me start there. Wisconsin owns Nebraska. All right. Wisconsin's won 10 straight against Nebraska and has 11-1 against them since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. The last time that Nebraska beat Wisconsin, I think it was like 1988 or something. It has been a high outside of my lifetime, right? So, I mean, this is kind of one of those things where this is just a series that Wisconsin owns. Now, you did say, kind of point this out. Defensively and even sort of offensively, these teams aren't really that different statistically. I think the one difference is offensively, Nebraska does have more big plays. They do kind of get drives into their opponent's 40 because their offensive echo rate is much higher. But when you look at Wisconsin, what I'm expecting them to do is set the tone defensively early. This is what they've been doing all season. They have allowed just 20 first quarter points all year. And just they're averaging about 7.4 points per game in the first half, right? So they set that tone early. I think you see more of that happen this week. Yeah, we talked about Dylan Raiola in Nebraska and how that offense looked amazing in the beginning of the year, all the Patrick Mahomes Jr. Quotes and comparisons, but they've since come down to earth and they've come down quite hard. I like Wisconsin, and like you said, in the money line, we support this from the model standpoint in terms of looking at the raw number there, or looking at the spread number with the model regression or the market regression. But I like Wisconsin money line here. I think the +2.5 is a lot of value because of that. Obviously, you want a 3, right? You sleep a little bit better at night with 3.5. But I think +2.5 is fine because this is a game Wisconsin will just win outright.
Yeah, I mean, our raw number here is Wisconsin winning by 7.5, so basically a touchdown. So I mean, we do show a lot of value there from that standpoint. Yeah, I mean, you saw the numbers there. They're a very similar team. I think want to dig a little bit deeper and say, okay, well, if there's similar stats, why do we lean in the direction of Wisconsin? I think there's two really important stats here that the model is taking into considerations. When we look at the offensive and defensive points per echo, we see that basically Wisconsin is picking up a point in each of those. What do I mean by that? If we look at offensive points per echo, Wisconsin is 49th versus Nebraska 118th, and that's 1 point difference per drive that Wisconsin is scoring more. But then when we look on the defensive side of the ball, Wisconsin is 19th in defensive points per echo, whereas Nebraska is 40th in defensive points per echo. Again, a full point difference on the defensive side of the ball. So basically, every drive Wisconsin has an offense, they score one more point, and then every drive defensively, they give up one less point. So pretty much every time Wisconsin's on the ball, they're a little bit incrementally better. And then the one thing I think is important here when we look at strength of record, when we look at Wisconsin, they end up being the 43rd highest strength of record. What does that mean? Strength of record is what is the probability that a top 25 team would have the same record as that team if they played it? And when we look at strength of record, Wisconsin is 43, but Nebraska is 57th. So Wisconsin has had a tough schedule and they have performed a bit better than Nebraska has in a similar schedule. So, for me, I think that's what the model's picking up. And these are all, classic Big Ten matchups. So, these could look pretty ugly. I'm sure they won't be sexy, but yeah, I think it's a good play here. Obviously, we played it, but I don't know. Are you bold enough to take the money line there?
Yeah, and actually, it's funny you say that because Cats on Horses has a question here. They're thinking about the same thing. +2.5 at -105, or take +110 money line. Now, this is a great example, and actually, I can show you here. We use Unabated, so shout out Unabated. They do have a line comparison tool. So if you use the code BTB, you get a 5-day free trial. But you can see here, Cats and Horses, comparing plus 2.5 at -105 to essentially a spread of 0, right? At plus 110, the 2.5 is a better line. If you can get money line at plus 112 or better, then I would take the money line. Otherwise, you'd want to take the spread. So
what if you get a -1 for the spread?
if you get a -1
for second line.
Oh, yeah.
Second line.
If you get a -1 for the spread, you need a plus 122, and that's a great call out, right? So not just a 0, but yeah. So
you need to win it.
Yeah, so you need a plus 122. So at this point, again, at plus 2.5, you can do that. And again, Cats and Horses, code BTB at unabated, 5-day free trial. Go nuts this weekend comparing those lines, or go nuts now comparing those lines, honestly.
Yeah. What was the number he said he could get for money line?
Plus 2.5.
Plus 110 money line.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Plus. Yep.
So one, shop the line. You could use BTB on unabated to look at the odds screen because you can get a 115. That calculation you did is a bit of a different calculation, right? Because that'll tell you which one is better value comparing those two. But I think the question he's asking is basically which one has more expected value, basically greater edge. And technically speaking, I'm gonna have to spitball a bit. So the value framework that we have, which is basically how much should you value each point, and not all points are valued equally, especially through key numbers and where you're going. And so since you've already crossed the 3, your money line is probably going to end up being actually a better value bet. But again, you're going to have to bet many more bets in order to realize this because you're not going to win at the same rate. So take that for what it's worth. But if you want to be bold and take the money line, plus 115 looks to be the best number in the market. So, I mean, like I said, the Caesars had plus 115. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm probably not bold enough in this spot.
Ooh.
But
all right.
What?
I've only known you to be the bold and the brave.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, I know you're getting older, you're getting wiser, more mature. I get it, man.
I mean, you could say it's alt season, like an alt here instead of money line. You could play like a 2.5, like a plus 2.5 or minus 2.5 Wisconsin. If you're really bold, minus 6.5 is a good alt, and you're going to get way better than 115. I don't know. Yeah, this one for me is just the model would support it. So
okay.
I don't know. We'll see. Well, these are like usually late week decisions for me how I'm going to play like alts.
But how many Bud Lights am I deep?
Or Coors Light. Yeah, I don't know. This one just feels, I don't know. All these Big Ten games are just gross. I feel like it's going to just be rainy, gray, and cold, and I can just like put myself. It's going to be like 3-5 somehow in that game.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Finally, leaving the Big Ten, we are headed to ACC country. We have SMU, Virginia. We are on Virginia plus 10, plus 9.5, whatever you can get either of those. We would support Virginia here going up against SMU. This is the week of the dog for sure for us. SMU coming in 10th best passing offense, 61st best rushing offense. Virginia 112th best passing offense, 59th best rushing offense. Now, the interesting thing here is they played pretty bad against Notre Dame, but that box score was a little bit misleading. But I think we have to give credit where credit is due. Virginia, they exemplified exactly this stat. 108th in point in Eckel rate, so allowing teams to get to the 40 or better, but 29th in points per Eckel. And that is the very reason that box score didn't look as bad as it was, because they didn't allow Notre Dame to score twice in the red zone and Notre Dame missed a field goal. So because of those reasons, they were actually able to cover that game. And I think that's one of the major driving statistics here. If you can, you look at actually how these teams perform, I think it comes down to the defensive side of the ball for Virginia. But you give me your kind of breakdown. Where do you think the success lies here for Virginia? Can they even, stay in the ballpark here with SMU and that high-powered offense?
Oh, yeah, I mean, this one is absolutely disgusting to me. This is the classic one where if we weren't betting with the model, I would be on SMU all day. But again, taking a step back and trying to think about it a little more rationally. I guess I can do the mental gymnastics getting here, but it's a lot here. So, like you mentioned, SMU has the more efficient pass offense, the more efficient pass and rush defense, and but Virginia did upset Pitt when they were ranked 23rd, right? That's the game where Pitt lost Eli Holstein in the third quarter, so you have that backup quarterback scenario coming in. How effective was Pitt's offense that game? Sure. But then you take a step back, you look at Virginia's losses, right? Like you mentioned, 21 by Notre Dame, but the box score was pretty misleading, by 27 to North Carolina and by 17 to Clemson. What I'm concerned about is Virginia's offense, right? I just don't know if I trust Anthony Calandria to get the job done here if Virginia gets down by a couple of scores. Because SMU, sure, yeah, you can potentially throw on SMU, but Calandria is 94th in passing efficiency in the country. Kevin Jennings for SMU is 15th, right? So if this game is going to have any chance of covering, it's going to have to be Virginia's defense, like you mentioned, not letting SMU get into the end zone, keeping those touchdowns to field goals and maybe field goals to no points scored at all, because that's the only way that this Virginia team keeps up. I don't trust them to kind of get into any form of a shootout with SMU. And I think the one thing that also scares me is rushing defense is SMU's strength. And Virginia's running back, Kobe Pace, I mean, he's averaging 47 yards per game. That ranks him 151st in the nation. I mean, that's just not at all going to cut it. So it's got to be Virginia's defense. It's got to be a low-scoring game, relative for SMU. Yeah. And the one thing that does give me hope here, and I'm grasping at straws, all right? Virginia is battle-tested, right? They have the 35th hardest strength of schedule so far this season, and they're 6-3-1 against the spread, 3-1 against the spread as underdogs. So if I'm just grasping here of, can this team do this? Have they done it before? Sure, they have. And so I will be watching with clenched butt cheeks for sure.
Yeah, and one other thing to add here, we know this team wants to cover. We know that they are into moral victories. So, the back door is wide open here. So, we saw them at the end of that Notre Dame game with like 21, 22 seconds left, call a timeout with the intent that we are going to score this touchdown. And so to me, can we see some of that attitude in this SMU game? Again, they play with the big dogs. SMU is not going to be good as Notre Dame, period, point blank. Yeah. And so are they gaining confidence here week in and week out? Obviously, they played with Purdue. They went up, a huge step up in class with going up against Notre Dame. They were able to kind of score on that last drive, get a little bit of confidence. SMU is a more manageable team here. And I'm trying to remember what we actually make this game. I mean, it's not like a game where I think we make it like 9 or something. Yeah, 8. So I mean, yeah, it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be tight. Yeah. We're basically saying it's somewhere in that 1.5 possessions. Miss PAT can get us here. A bunch of field goals can get us here. So that's what we are holding on hope for. Okay, last game we're going to talk about, and it's a big one, and I guess it's fitting for this episode. We're going back to the Big Ten, baby. Indiana versus Ohio State, one of the biggest matchups of the year. Indiana is just blowing through teams. Definitely, obviously, just over expectation, in my opinion here. Undefeated. Ohio State coming in. They were the number one team to win it all going into the season. And here we are, one of the biggest marquee matchups. I don't think that was on anyone's bingo card going into the season. Indiana, number one best passing offense in the nation, 55th best rushing offense. Ohio State, fifth most passing efficient team, fifth most rushing efficient team. Steve, tell me why Ohio State is going to beat the shit out of Indiana.
Oh, baby, I will love to tell you why.
Okay.
I want to make a correction from earlier because I had this stat mixed up for the Nebraska game. Indiana is a team that hasn't beaten Ohio State since 1988. Never in our lifetime have we seen Indiana beat Ohio State University. Ohio State owns this all-time series 80-12 with 5 ties sprinkled in there over the course of the series here. Now, Indiana is coming off a bye. You can say, hey, they've got that extra week to kind of game plan for what will be the biggest game in the season for them so far. And here's the problem, though, Seth. I want to see Curtis Roke throw the damn ball, right? I want to see him throw it. Indiana's good at throwing the ball, like you mentioned. Not only are they efficient at it, they will do it, and they will do it more than an average team because they're so good at it. But here's the problem. Ohio State is going to be the best passing defense in the Big Ten, near the top nationally. And so this is going to be the toughest test that Rourke has gotten so far. Now, if you compare him and Will Howard from Iowa State, I mean, these two quarterbacks are pretty similar. On the season, Rourke has been 171 for 238 for 2,400-ish yards, 21 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Will Howard, 186 for 255, 2,480 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 5 picks. So you have pretty comparable quarterback play here. The difference, though, is Ohio State is also really good at running the ball, right? So you've got Travion Henderson and Quishon Judkins. Like, they can run the ball there. Indiana's not bad, but they are nowhere in the same stratosphere in running the ball as they are in throwing the ball. And so if you get Curtis Rourke into some kind of trouble, you shut him down and make this team a little more one-dimensional, I don't know if Tyson Lawson and Justice Ellison can really put the team on their back here. And there's two big things that concern me about this game, right? So we already talked about the differences in the stats here, but Ohio State is number 1 in the country in red zone offense and number 2 in the country in red zone defense. So you've created a scenario where you can see Ohio State finishing drives and preventing Indiana from finishing those drives. IU cannot settle for field goals in this game. That's just not going to cut it.
No.
And then the last thing I'll say is team talent, right? I mean, and this is something that you kind of harped on, I think, a couple of weeks back. And I'm not sure, do we have the team talent on the graphic here?
Yes, I think it's the very last column. Team talent.
Yeah. Okay. So you see this team talent score 998 to 668. And why do we care about this, right? I mean, we've said all throughout the season, don't forget these teams have dudes. And we use that example when we're talking about Michigan, right? And you saw Indiana was 14.5-point favorites against Michigan. Michigan's having a struggling season, certainly by their own standards, right? Coming in around 5-5. But you look at that game, sure, Indiana got up by as much as 14. So depending on when you got that line, you either never were covering in that game or you were just barely covering in that game. But you saw what Michigan did in the second half to make that a 5-point game there. And they had a chance to tie it up because Michigan has dudes, right? And so no matter how bad you're playing, this is what happens when you start facing very stiff competition. And I think it's going to be more of the same with Ohio State. I think the difference is Ohio State's going to continue to put it together like they've done all season long, except for that one game against Oregon. And this can get out of hand pretty quick.
But you said it there, against Oregon, who is the 4th best talented team in the nation. I mean, these are the big guys playing the big dogs. Like, this is what it is. To put rankings on that, Ohio State on those ranking numbers, 3rd best roster in the nation from 4- and 5-star recruiting and overall talent. Indiana. Well, actually, let's start with Michigan. Michigan was 16th, okay, on that list. Indiana, 51st, okay? This is a different level of competition, and we can see that through the strength of schedule. Ohio State, 28th hardest schedule. Indiana, 106th. Now, credit where credit is due. When we look at strength of record, basically, again, looking at how well these teams have performed in that record, Indiana improves all the way to 6th, meaning they are dominating the record that they've had, but it's not a hard schedule in which they're doing it. So I'm with you here. The raw model number is 17.5. You could argue alt season here, but I mean, you'd probably not want to take anything more than a 13.5, maybe a 16.5. You want to go crazy. I think this is OHIO all day. I fear that Indiana somehow wins, and people are going to like bet their mortgage when it comes to playoff team time. And, you know, because this Indiana team, I think it's just ripe for regression. We haven't seen anything like this in college with the transfer portal, but we haven't seen anything like this where, I mean, we have seen upsets. Of course, upsets happen. Can upsets happen here? 100%. I just don't know if this is the team you think you're buying. Like, cover, maybe. Win, I'm not sure for Indiana. But my money would be on Ohio State.
Yeah, no, I totally agree here. And this is one, full disclosure, I have sprinkled a little bit. And I think I might sprinkle in on the 16.5 too. I got to look and see what the numbers are there. But I do want to hear cats on the horses. I do want to hear in the chat. You said you double dipped here. I want to know what you got here. Some futures on Ohio State and what else you got there. But I'm with you, Seth. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I love a good Cinderella story. I want nothing but anarchy and chaos. by the time we get to the final selection for the CFP. But you got to be a little realistic here. I think this is kind of where the clock strikes midnight for a good Indiana team. Love what they're doing, but I think this may be too much.
Yeah, and who knows how the Big Ten plays out? Can they still go to the playoff and do all that? I don't,
Sure.
maybe. But look, Kirk Cincinnati, he just signed an 8-year contract next year. This is a team that is going to be good, and probably next year they're going to be really good because now they can recruit a little bit better than they could before, and the portal now can become their friend even more so because now the dudes want to go to Indiana because they're going to be able to get playing time and they can kind of start over this kind of start a new leaf with this momentum they've gained. And so next year, I won't be surprised if Indiana goes from 51st best roster to 20th best roster. But again, this year, they do not have the quality of dudes. And we saw this. I'm not saying Indiana is as bad as Liberty from a talent standpoint, but when Liberty played Oregon last year, it was a slaughterhouse because again, why? It's not that Liberty's not good. It's that when you look at every single position down the whole roster, every single player on Ohio State is better than Indiana. So that's our take. That's the model is spitting out. Ohio State would be value there. The problem is it's very minimal value. It's basically like a break-even bet, or you can see there at the 11. Now, as the market keeps buying, our numbers become more favorable, right? Because we're regressing to our large 17 number, and as the market agrees with us, we kind of converge to a consensus. So that negative expected value that you're seeing for Ohio State is basically shrinking and shrinking and shrinking at this point. But to be honest, it's never going to get to a spot for us to bet it via our criteria, unless you believe the raw number and you want to take the market out of the equation, which maybe you do, maybe you don't want to do.
Yeah. I actually am getting a phone call here. I've heard, because we had so many Big Ten games, the BTB analytics now stands for Big Ten analytics. All right, so we're in there now. We're changing the first BTB, the Big Ten board analytics.
There you go.
I love it.
Well, in a past life, I lived in Indiana, so I've actually been to Purdue and Indiana. I got to give it to Purdue. I think they had the better of the campuses, but Indiana gets quite gray. I think maybe I just had a bad day when I went to IU. So, all right, we're headed into the landscape. What are we doing? Landscape or landscape. All right, so we reran the power ratings. This is kind of where we're at. We see Notre Dame still sticking out there. They've had obviously a bunch of just dominant wins, quite frankly. Even last week was a little less dominant than the box score was less dominant than the actual game. But I want to run through the ESPN playoff rankings because they just dropped and kind of get your thoughts here. So in first place, we have Oregon, number 2, Texas, then Miami at 3rd, Boise State, number 4. 5 is Ohio State. 6 is Penn State. Interesting there. 7, Indiana. 8, Notre Dame. 9 is Alabama. 10, Ole Miss. 11, Georgia. 12, BYU. So one Big 12 team. Boise State is number 4 somehow. That seems. Can I get your reaction on that? Yes. Yeah, that's wild.
Wait, what?
This can't be right. I'm on ESPN's website, ESPN, the updated CFB bracket, and it has Boise State at number 4. I must be missing something.
That cannot be right.
It can't be right.
And also, how is Miami still number 3?
Yeah, this can't be right. This is on ESPN's. This is on ESPN's website. I'm trying to get a date here. November 19th. That's today, isn't it not?
Yeah. Wow. ESPN. This might be fake news. I don't know. We'll
yeah. I'm gonna keep looking. Week 13, 12 CFB bracket projection. Is that something different? This is not good podcasting, but that's what it's showing on their website.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can give you my visceral reaction to that. That's
please do.
That's pretty freaking wild. I don't see how that sticks. But I will say though, I am. There is a scenario that I do want to talk about, and it's not necessarily through what the playoff picture looks like, but I do have a question for you about the conference champions, because there's a kind of a wild thing that I saw, and I want to get your opinion on this before I kind of go off the deep end with this.
Okay.
So you want to do that now? Or do you want to go and do the ranking stuff first?
Let's do yours. I
Okay.
can't find a reliable thing. There's no way Boise State is number 4. ESPN
Yeah.
smoking crack.
Yeah. All right. Can we get the landscape back up here then? All right. This is what I want to talk about. All right. Army. Okay. Army
Yep.
football. Right.
Yep.
So ESPN Bet has Army at plus 225 to win the AAC. All right. And it's kind of hard to see on the graph here, but Army's in that top right quadrant of elite above BYU. Yeah, thank you. Right above BYU. And then you have Tulane. Tulane's on the top right quadrant. If you can find Clemson and Miami, they're in between them right below Boise State here. Okay.
Yeah.
So why do I bring this up? So Army and Tulane they've already clinched the AAC game, right? They're already going to the championship game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Those are your two teams playing for the AAC conference championship. Now, Army has to play Notre Dame this week. They have to play UTSA on the 30th. You have the AAC championship game, which again, we just discussed will be Tulane on December 6th. And then you have the Army-Navy game on December 14th. Okay. Why is that important? I believe Army is the better team than Tulane. And that's kind of where this discussion comes into. So essentially, you're asking yourself, at plus 220 odds, would you take Army money line over Tulane? Because that's the scenario for Army to beat or to become the AAC champion, right? Because no matter what, they're both going to the game. Now, in terms of making the CFP, right? So the highest ranked conference winner is going to get that G5 spot. And so Boise State right now has that slot. They have to play Wyoming and Oregon State in the regular season, and both those two teams are trash. So Boise State should have no problem whatsoever. Then you have the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State will either have to play Colorado State or I believe UNLV, depending on how things kind of shake out in the last few weeks here. So Boise State, it's really their spot to lose. You can make an argument about the championship game. Army's probably going to lose to Notre Dame, right? So if you have 2 one-loss teams, it's going to be Boise State's spot unless something crazy happens, right? And then really that craziness is Boise State loses the Mountain West Championship game. So all this says, you hear this narrative about Army-Navy game. How big is that game going to be? Because if Army goes into the playoff, then, that's how many straight weeks of football. Are they going to try to rest some starters, things like that? And my thing here is, even if that happens, it's not the AAC championship game. If anything, if Army's like, hey, let's be strategic about this. Let's try to, if we're not going to try to run the table, if we don't believe we're going to get to the playoff, if you wanted to rest players, UTSA is a game that rests players. Again, I'm not saying that they will, but that game is inconsequential if Boise State does what it's supposed to do. Now, I think in the real world, you're going to see Army play their starters for all 4 games. But there's something there for they have a reason to play in the AAC championship. They have a reason to beat Tulane. So I'm just confused on why it's plus 220 for them to win the AAC championship when they've already clinched. It's literally Army money line plus 220 over Tulane. And that's a bet I'm taking every day at plus 220. But am I missing something crazy here? You've been big Army, go Army beat Navy all year. I just don't know if I'm missing
Tulane's good.
Here.
Tulane's
sure,
good. Like,
sure, no
problem. This is interesting. I'm trying to run the Sims here, but I don't know. Basically, I'll have to take a look at the power rating that we have.
Sure.
For whatever reason, I was trying to pull it up. I don't have Tulane in the data right now. And I don't know why, but I think it's because they're on a bye this week, I'm assuming. Yeah, I don't know. But you're right. Basically, if you can price that game well, and you think that, the true number is plus 150 or whatever, I don't think Army will be favored. I think you would agree.
You don't think Army will be favored against Tulane?
Yeah.
I can buy plus 3 either way. I think that's as far as it goes.
You think this is plus 3?
Army versus Tulane?
If that's your assumption, then you have to bet plus 220.
Yeah. What's your mental model? You have to just spitball this fire from the head.
I don't know. I don't even think that's why I built a real model. I can't even if you give me like one second
Sure.
here, I can get a number. But yeah, I think if you work with that assumption that you highlighted, you have to take plus 220.
Yeah. And I want to be clear for folks maybe watching. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not the only reason that I'm making this argument is
Yeah.
because Army has already clinched the spot. So it's like normally you would say in any other scenario, you're actually parlaying them winning multiple games
Yeah.
to get to
Mhm.
the championship game. And that's a
No matter what
completely different set of
happens.
odds. Right. That's a completely different scenario. But no matter what happens, this is the matchup. Army can lose to UTSA and Notre Dame, and it'll still be in the championship game. So it really is just a money line bet.
Yeah. All right. This should work. Tulane. I guess we can edit this out. So yeah, we should totally do this. Shout out to the people that are live. I'm sorry. Not as fun for you. All right. Remember these two numbers, 35 and then subtract 22.24.
So 35 minus 22.24.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just putting in the chat just so I have it. So you got what, 12.76.
That's what the difference is?
Yep.
Okay. So then take that number, 12.76, and subtract 4.53.
This is the fucking SATs. 12.76 minus 4.53.
Yeah.
All right,
What
that's
did you get?
8.23.
There you go.
So you
Tulane
made
should
the
be
game
favored
8
by
points.
8 points. So
Man, and that's why you have a model, but
yeah. This is using thousands of observations. Yeah. It's 3, but either way. Yeah. I mean, you asked the number. Now, again, I don't think a +8 dog, and this is when, shout out unabated, we can go. I mean, look, there's got to be an archetype of a team that's favored by 8 this week. I'm just searching 8.5 for Kennesaw State. Let's just try to find it. Right on 8. Pittsburgh Louisville is 8. So I'm going to just flip on over to the money line and look that game up. That money line is plus 255.
oh,
So
all right. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take, in my mental model, I'm gonna say that 8 number is a raw number. The market's gonna be a lot lower. We have to regress that line. The true number is gonna be like 5.5, and then 220 becomes a steal.
we'll see. So that's a power rating. So that's on a neutral field, which in this case it will. I think actually is it a neutral field? I think the AAC is one of the few where they actually play the number 1 team. So it'd actually be in Tulane. So you have to add a little bit more for home field advantage to that.
It's in Spectrum Stadium in Orlando, Florida. Per the Googles.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think it's the bet you think it is.
Okay. No. This is why we do
talk you off the ledge.
Yeah. No. Don't jump. All right. Maybe I do have something to look for.
I mean, I'll run the simulations right now. Unfortunately, it won't have it doesn't have last week's stuff in it. But this will give us an idea.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. I'll say why you had that. Eric got the top 12 for us.
Yeah, me too.
Oh,
Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5, Notre Dame 6, Alabama 7, Miami 8, Mississippi 9, Georgia 10. So Georgia's back in. Tennessee 11. Interesting. And now Boise at 12. But this is so frustrating because they're literally not telling us anything. I mean, they're basically saying they're lying. They're lying. This is not true. So they have 3 Big Ten teams in the top 4. Not possible by their own rules.
Right.
So that makes no sense. Notre Dame's at 6. That's very improbable because, again, it's more than likely seeds 5 and 6 are going to be the runner-up of the SEC in the Big Ten. So where does Notre Dame go? You have Georgia, Tennessee. So how many SEC schools? They have Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas. And then Big Ten, they have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana. There you go. So 4 versus 5. So 9 of the seeds are Big Ten and SEC. What they should just get rid of everything else and just make SEC, Ohio State, or SEC, Big Ten playoffs, right?
Yeah.
What's your visceral reaction?
Yeah, I will be. You're right there, and I want to take some more time to kind of look at this because you're right. I mean, there's as we get into next week, there is going to be some sort of more concrete prediction and kind of scenario you can cast out to really try to take advantage of some potential matchups. Right, you're still making assumptions here, but you're right. I mean, some of these teams are going to dramatically slide down and slide up just by the CFP's rules. So I would be very shocked to see Tennessee, quite honestly, make it. I mean, we're having this conversation about will a two-loss Georgia team get into the CFP playoff and given their the schedule and where they're at. Now, obviously, they mollywopped Tennessee there, so that definitely helps their case. But I just don't know how you make that argument and then keep other teams out who, from what we've seen so far, has had a quote better resume from a win-loss standpoint for the committee. But I will say this: we got to get Notre Dame in the conference. I'm tired of Notre Dame getting a pass every freaking year because they're independent. They've joined the AAC for basketball, put them in a conference for football, be done with it, make them play a conference championship game, and make them earn it like the rest of us. So that's my soapbox.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, basically my opinion on these is that they're lies. They're not true. Like they're not even helpful because their first 4 teams have 3 Big Ten teams, which won't happen. So then you have to shift all those other teams outside of the 4, which means that some teams are going to get shifted out and up, and it just the interesting thing here is the seeds matter. The seeds matter because the interesting thing about 5 and 6 is you get to play a shit team on the road, but then in the second round you get a playoff game at home in the second round, and you get to go play a shittier team on the road first, and then you get to come home later in the playoffs. So like 5 and 6 are really interesting spots.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it's clear that they like the SEC and they like the Big Ten. So if you're a fan of those teams,
this is the playoff for you.
This is the playoff for you. Okay, Army, 31.2% chance to make to win the conference. So I'm trying to convert this to odds, but I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Sure.
1 to 2.2. So literally exactly plus 220.
Let's go. All right. So plus 225 is plus EV. Shout out ESPN Bet.
Yes. 225 is like 0.03% edge for you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think that's a good segue to off the numbers. Unless you have any other final thoughts on this one.
Nope. No. So basically, long story short, it's price competitive.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right. You want to kick off the numbers?
All right. Let's do it. Okay. Off the numbers. It's starting to heat up. Steve, I think you're making a comeback.
Remember, wrong sport. No.
Oh, wrong sport.
Okay.
Never mind. It was a dream I had once.
Yeah, we can pull the card. Eric, you want to show the card here so the people know.
So anyways, off the numbers, this is basically our in-house kind of competition where we are trying to use any information we want other than what our model is picking. Now, you can still use the model to kind of help you. And Steve, I would recommend you do start doing that. But these are supposed to be your kind of like own kind of handicapping. So far, Kevin, 5 and 3. I am also 5 and 3, and I guess Steve is a little bit behind there with 2 and 6. Okay, so this week Kevin's off the numbers is over 58 TCU Arizona. I didn't get a chance to speak with him about his logic, but I'm assuming it goes something like both these defenses suck, both these offenses are just going to shoot each other out, and bam, you got an over. I'm on Penn State 11.5 going up against Minnesota. Our model really likes this game. We make this 19. It's about a 1.7% edge via our model. We just aren't quite there. But I'm going to believe the raw number here, and I'm going to go with 11.5. You can actually get this at minus 107 to bet Rivers. And RIP, I think my badge of honor, I got another one to add in my chest. I am limited on Rivers, unfortunately for me. But all y'all, I hope you can keep eating over there. Minus 107. I really like this bet. Okay, Steve, you're swinging for the fences. We just talked about Army to win the AAC, but you got them. You're not waiting until then. This is the week. Army money line. Talk to me about it.
Yeah. Here's the thing. So I'm 2-6. My season's over with. All right. Listen, I'm looking at my roster. I'm looking at my picks, and I'm saying, hey, what do I have for next year? Who can show me something? Who wants to make a play? All right. Now, what I do propose, just to keep things spicy, right?
Okay.
I'm taking a super dog this week in Army over Notre Dame. And the logic is very simple. Army is a very competitive team. They have they're leading the nation in rushing. Their Bryson Daly he has more rushing touchdowns to the quarterback than essentially every running back not named Ashton Genty for the most part. This is a team that we've seen. This is unlike any other Army team we've seen. And Notre Dame is good for one late season collapse every year like clockwork. I know they've already lost NIU early. The haters will say they've got it out their way. They're rolling right now. They've been dominating. I think they defeated the other military school, Navy, 55-0, something like that. I mean, they've been rolling. Perfect time for it to all come to an inexplicable screeching halt. I'm taking Army to do that this week, plus 520. Now, what I propose here is, because this is a super dog, I think I should get one win for if they win, and then I should be able to convert one loss to a win. Therefore, go from, instead of being 3-6, be 4-5 if Army wins. Otherwise, I'm 2-7. Just to keep things spicy.
I mean, Kevin's not here to vote, but if we agree, I mean, we only need 2/3 votes. Like, this should be worth 5 units. You're gonna win five bets. So I think it should be worth 5.
This is the season then. We get to do it. It'll be, we can do win percentage at the end of the season, and then this could be 5 units or 5. Yeah. Okay. I like that.
I think a better dog could be Utah. This dog is this is crazy. We make the number 24.
Let's do it.
This is a different Army team.
Yeah, this is the Army team fighting for America. Eric loves it.
As opposed to who were they fighting for before? I don't know. This Notre Dame
sponsorship deals and ad placement, NIL. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, okay. 5. What is it? 525?
520.
520. Use code BTB on unabated to make sure that you're getting the best odds there. Yeah. All right. I'm down. I mean, is that fair? You get 5. You get 5. Fair. If you win, you'd be 7-6.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we just do win percentage at the end of the year. Yeah.
Okay. I'm done.
All right.
Yeah. We still need to figure out what we're actually playing for.
I know.
I'm going to be sitting in a Del Taco, I think, soon.
I'll be right there with you. So
Eric said Kev's probably fuming. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I guess. Yeah, but and then you're just punished 1 unit if you lose. But that's like the monetary action of what's happening.
Yeah, like exactly. Right.
So, yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we went over a number of the model picks, but we're going to go over the full card here. And I assure you, it's only more ugly than the games we went over. But we got to do it. We'll recap the model here. So far through week 12, we are 71, 58, and 1, which is profitable. We're sitting right around 55%, which quite frankly is where we feel like we're going to end up. That's where we expect to end up. Now we have this week and next week, and then conference games. And then we'll probably have some action, I would imagine, on the playoff games. But as you guys know, way less volume come playoffs time. So I would project us, we're probably around another 20 to 35 bets, I would say, is where we're headed. So without further ado, week 13 model plays. We are on NC State plus 9.5. We are over then Friday Night Lights, Purdue plus 14, UVA, Virginia plus 10 versus SMU, Troy plus 11.5, Wisconsin plus 2.5, and Iowa minus 6. So that is what we are playing for week 13. It is ugly. There may be some later plays that we end up sending out. There's a couple that are moving in our direction that we'll continue to evaluate. Hint, hint, Northwestern versus Virginia or versus Michigan might be a play there at the 10.5. But we'll have to evaluate some of these plays. But all right, Steve, that's it for week 13. Anything else you want to cover or tell the beautiful people?
No, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today and having some laughs, learning some things about betting, and getting some good picks in. If you like this, please like the video. Please subscribe. That lets us know to continue doing this more so we can be back every single week, giving you that value that you can't find anywhere else. And as always, good luck.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. This is BTB. This was week 13, and we will be back next week. All right, guys. Take care.